Well, so it's been about a week or so since the Verizon guy came in to install the FiOS, and I have pretty much everything set up now. So I actually have two connections into the internet, one through Comcast and one through Verizon. And now that I've got both connections into my basement, I can do side-by-side comparisons to see which is better between the two. And of course, here's a spoiler alert: FiOS is better. But at least I want to show you a little bit of how I've got things set up, so you can actually see the two connections into my basement, a little bit of the wiring setup, and then we'll go upstairs and we'll actually do some bandwidth benchmarking to see how the two compare. So if you guys remember way back when, last week, they came in, they set up this box. I can't remember exactly the name of the box. And this is it. So this is where the fiber comes into my basement from FiOS. And this cable right here is the Ethernet cable that comes out. And then routes over all the way across over to the other side of my basement, where I've got all my routers and switches and all that. So, and then the regular cable from Cablevision, I believe, is this cable right here. And it's basically comes in, winds around, and goes up and down, left and right, and eventually makes it over to here. And then over here, we've got the cables, the Ethernet, Comcast, and the Ethernet cables coming in. And you follow them along here, come around, and down into this area. And then finally they tie into all my boxes. So these are all my network boxes that I've got down here in my basement. And if we pan out a little bit, you can see all the crud that I have. And then my two servers that I use to run my websites, and monitors and keyboards and stuff. So now to look at the details over here, this is the Comcast connection. I've got a business internet access into my basement. I do that because I want some static IP addresses, and so that's what I have. Then I have some switches here, which I use. These are my public IP addresses that are managed by this switch here, and so on. And then over here is the Verizon router that comes in, and it's the one that's plugged into the Ethernet connection. Okay, so that I showed you in the box over on the other side of my basement. Now here's the trick. In order to set up your static IP addresses, the easiest way to do it, or to manage your static IP addresses through Verizon, the easiest way to do it is to take the Ethernet cable. So this guy here, this is the Ethernet cable that comes from the box over from there. That's the Ethernet cable that I showed you guys. Comes over here, all right? And then what I did is I took this Ethernet cable and I plugged it in to the switch. So this switch, this is just a standard Netgear gigabit Ethernet switch. It's an 8-port, cost me like $70 at Best Buy. And this cable here is actually the one that feeds directly over to, no, I'm lying. Well, one of these cables, I think this is the cable. This cable here, if you follow it, no, this one. This cable here, if you follow it, actually plugs into this cable here, which goes over to the box in the corner. And this switch here is essentially open to the internet. There's no port blocking. It's essentially a raw, the visibility is right there out onto the public internet, right here on this switch. And then what I did is I took my two servers here and I plugged each one of them. I added an Ethernet card. And if you want to take a look down here, this cable here, okay, that's an Ethernet card that I added in recently. And then to that server over there, I if you look, there's another Ethernet at the bottom. That's another Ethernet card that I added in. And those two are now on the public IP addresses. So they're essentially my public, on the public space of the Verizon static IPs that I've done. So those plug into here. And then I have a connection from this switch over to this router. And then this router is then plugged into my internal home network. And that's essentially how it's done. So did you guys follow that? Cable from the other side comes over here. Ethernet cable plugs into the switch. The switch then fans out all the IP address spaces, and it goes to the router. It goes to my servers, which have their static IP addresses now available on the internet. And then from the router, I then go into my internal network for the house, my home network. It's the 192.168 type network. So there's roughly, now the Comcast is a little bit different. This is a true router in the sense that, well, you have, this is the coax cable that comes in. Then this guy actually provides a little route. It's, I think, a 6-bit routing mask. I'm not sure what exactly the term is. But it provides 5 static IP addresses for me, but it internally manages these IP addresses. So I don't need an external switch like I did over here for Verizon. And basically what happens with the Comcast is I've got 2 cables plugged in. One manages the external static IP addresses that are visible out on the internet, and then the other one goes to that same internal network. And basically this cable here and this cable here, this is Verizon, this is the Comcast, this cable here, they're both plugged into this switch here, which is part of the home network. Okay, so that's how my my network is set up down here. My network central, my NOC, and the next step is I'll go upstairs, and I've got what I've done so far. Here are my 2 servers. So on one server, I think this server here, this guy is set up such that it gets its full bandwidth from Comcast, and then actually the server that I have up in my office or my desktop, it's set up to get its full bandwidth out of the Verizon access into the internet. And we're going to do side-by-side comparisons and see how it goes. Okay, so any questions?